continuously connect from people in Austin, man. So
Yeah, it's
welcome
wild.
everybody. Yes, welcome everyone to Resilient Minds podcast. I'm excited. Today we got Sean Clayton on the show. Really pumped to have you here, my brother. Coming in from Austin, Texas. A gentleman, from a layer of depth that today on the Lionsgate portal we get to go to and discover and experience and have this grace, bro. But before we go there, I just want to, really acknowledge the space of adversity that you're really coming from. You've overcome some really key integrations that have challenged you to look at opportunities as lessons and continuously to navigate in the space of deep healing and deep wisdom from, I imagine, has been a lot of your own uh, opportunities. And so seeing that as an observation and stepping into that layer of responsibility is a profound way to look at life, bro. And I just want to really acknowledge you for the time and energy you spent on yourself. And then also now, share a little bit about, yourself, what you're up to, what you're creating, what you're manifesting every single day, bro. And yeah, let us feel a little bit of your heart, my bro.
Yeah, 100%. You want me to talk trauma first? Do you want to go into into what I'm doing?
All,
Backstory or
all the amazing stuff that you're up to right now in this moment.
what I'm up to right now in this moment. So what I'm up to right now in this moment, it's I call it a lot of three-dimensional growth. And it's a lot of three-dimensional growth from a perspective of truly finally knowing as much of myself as I could possibly know based on the journey that I've been on, right? And cool things that are happening. I own a marketing agency that's really starting to snap into place, and we're moving into what I call is just working with consciousness instead of working with just the people. And so, like, yesterday we had an awesome retreat and everybody came into town and we're talking about our ideal customer profile. And it was cool because it shifted from, oh, we need to hit somebody with 10 million in revenue and blah, 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 all the stuff you kind of talk about before, into what is the heart space of our clients? Where are they at on their conscious journey? They might be working on like the craziest thing in the world, but where do they need to be and how can we see a way to map them there? And even looking at the masculine and feminine architecture of how they show up. Are they givers or are they takers, right? Are they receivers, right? Like what is it in their energy? Are they embodied or unembodied? And so being able to, as an agency, which like most marketing agencies don't look at things that way, start to understand all of the kind of code that rides underneath it that creates the energy that creates the reality, and the team starting to what I call egregore around that so that we consensus creates the beautiful things that show up in life. It has been really cool because I've always saw my business as separate from my conscious business, and now those
Mhm.
things are coming together. So that's that piece. The other cool thing is, been super heavy. I got snatched in all these different political campaigns out of the blue. And it's not anything that I felt like I asked for per se, but I know my soul did. And so working on those has been like you see the polarity between both sides. And you're like, oh, okay, like in the US, you've got Kamala, you got Trump, There's no right or wrong when you get into consciousness. It's just a matter of what do they stand for? And where are they moving in their energy or their fear? Are they in love? Are they moving in abundance? Are they moving in scarcity? And, the job of any of us who I would consider are walking in this, Christ energy or this Messianic energy, right, is to find balance and bring those things together, right? It's not about taking one side or another. It's about, okay, how do you bring and merge people together to get them to start to create their reality? And whether you're working with not necessarily candidates per se, but what's the energy around where we're moving? Because I have a notion that we are on a very rapid path to either destruction or massive healing. Both lead to an ascension process. And we all have to do our part. If my part is, hey, I've got this marketing lens, I've got a cool agency, I can make awesome videos and I can snap in things that are culturally relevant in a conscious space where everything has felt very Magoo or kind of nerdy or separate. And like if I'm conscious or if I'm moving into my consciousness or doing the healing work, I've got to be weird. I've got to be on the outside bounds. And and that is great. On the other side, how can we make it so the guy on Wall Street in the suit and tie who knows that his soul's been calling him can start to be like, oh, well, this doesn't have to be so strange. This actually can be normal in my world. And we're starting to pierce that veil, which I feel like is bringing matter and energy together in a way that it never has before. So that's that. And then there's the what my heart is really called to on a daily basis is how can I help people wake up in the reproduction of the love of myself? Because everybody that I experience is a vibratory match of a part of me. And so I could meet an asshole on the street was a part of me that's a vibratory match too. So I got to understand what part of me that is and how do I love that person, right? Or, now the Instagram's grown like crazy and I get a lot of DMs and people who are in their trauma or whatever it might be. And I'm launching a class to really show people like the steps that I've gone through and it's very specific architecture. Like it's like, oh wow, like it's actually tied to this. Well, you can't really see it, but the Philosopher's Stone has very specific code in it. That in that code, once you break that down, you understand how to actually map everything in our world of experience from self that brings you into the God within that creates the understanding of the God that created you. So all of that in itself is really where I'm mapping. And, we launched the first entry point of the class yesterday and we had 500 signups on a goal of like 1,000. It's in the 18th. And I'm like, oh, well, this is awesome. So that's really throttling itself. And, I'm just super excited of being able to open that container and it's free, right? It's just like, come on in. And it's always weird charging for this stuff. Even though you have to create energetic balance. So there'll always be an ask, but on the other side, it's like, how can you make it as accessible as you possibly can to as many people? Because, the world needs this right now.
I agree. I agree, especially over, the course of the last few years. I believe we've been really going through these capacities of our own adversities to now fundamentally integrate everything that we have experienced in our own ways so that, as you mentioned, the world actually comes and was attracted to what we are saying. And so I'm curious to go deeper into, some of these polarities and you mentioned a lot of the things with regards to fun and Philosopher's Stone and really bringing that together. I'd be curious to know kind of, we always talk about our experiences really will contribute to our why. And I imagine, through your adversities, you have discovered the fun, and maybe that's what has also allowed you to see it in the Philosopher's Stone. So, how did that tie in through your own experiences, and how were you able to amplify that to the Philosopher's Stone and the way that you're able to contribute your intelligence to the people that you serve?
Yeah. No, great question. So when I started, I gotta go like when I started on this path, I got deep into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And love Dr. Joe. Yeah, he's amazing. And I mean, I went to like 9 retreats in a row. I was so hooked on this thing. And so much abundance came into my life.
He's such a
And
blessing. Such a
oh,
blessing.
he's the best, man. I mean, I healed my back, I had tried to take my life. I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't pick up anything. Like it was nuts. Um, and as I went through that, doors start to unlock. And candidly, my wife, my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, went to my fiance, the whole thing. She opened my mind up to meditation because I grew up in the church and was very like regimented, Texas boy, the whole thing. And as she opened my mind up and I went into Joe world, a couple of things happened. One, you start to regurgitate everything somebody else is saying without you really knowing it yourself. So it took a process of me integrating that and figuring out what fun really means, because fun is a judgment call, right? Fun is like, well, it's fun to use and fun to somebody else, right? There's chefs that have a blast every single day, and maybe for me, like I don't want to cut onions, so it depends on what fun looks like. And what I would say is that for what I see in the world, and as I've gone through Joe's work, my experience in that was that he made meditation different. He It was like a party when you went to one of his retreats, and people kept coming back and they kept getting hooked. And like the hook wasn't the fact that they were addicted to it. The hook was the fact that they started to see this really coherent container that can create magic. What pinged to me at that moment in time, and I had kept talking about this with friends around me, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" But our consensus creates our reality. And so oftentimes people are like, hey, I got to detach from the world because my little mini group, we can do really miraculous things. When I'm in this set of people, I get really abundant. When I'm in this set of people, I get healed. When I'm in this set of people, I just feel better. Right. And so what that's done is it's created a lot of separation because I have to be around these people to feel good. And this is the problem with that is that that's the illusion. You're focusing on the illusion and not what's within. There's something inside of you that created this little mini miracle in your life. That when you can create that miracle in your life, you can start to see the world outside of you the same way. But you have to know that so well. And that's where it tied into the whole Philosopher's Stone thing. So about a year and a half after I got past it, I did this ayahuasca journey. And ayahuasca kind of opened me up into this spiritual asshole space where I was like, I know all this stuff. I got to tell the world. There was like a whole new knowing that was outside of the stuff I learned in Joe. But that led me into, I think I did like 9 months of like crazy plant medicine. It was about 9 months. And then my last one was Iboga, where I had to go through and work through all my trauma. And it paralyzed me to the floor. And I started recognizing my mother wounds. I started recognizing how I wasn't embracing or receiving anything from a feminine energy perspective. And when I unblocked that feminine receivership inside of myself, two things happened. One, I fixed the relationship with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And we've come such a long way because the guy I was not great. What also happened is like a flood of information of it was like all of these doors opened up around knowledge that I could not have gotten by sitting in just Joe's community or just the Sadhguru community or in some other guru's community. So I went on my own quest after that and, started reading, books like, the Sefer Yetzirah that was like, oh, well, what the hell is this all about? And that's, Book of Creation, which is the Kabbalah. I started working with a rabbi out of Israel who's teaching me all these different things. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. That opened a portal. That portal then opened up principles around hermetics. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, now what is this about? So, it's funny inside of this, you have the hermetic principles, oddly, which is also you have the same hermetic principles inside of the Sermon on the Mount, which you also have you have them all over the place. You have them in the 7 days of creation, but people don't see the code inside of it. So I was like, well, why do they keep putting this symbol on like the Kabbalah and on side, the same Philosopher's Stone symbol on side of it? So then you just sit with it for a while and you look at Tesla's work around 369. What does that mean? And I put out a video about it recently, but the there's dimensions that we live in. And every dimension has a very specific practice that goes along with it. Okay. So you have practices of space that you're supposed to get into. And inside of that, there are 7 laws that sit within that space. So you have 7 laws of the universe, but those 7 laws of the universe live in each individual dimension. That's what I recognize. And you have linear aspects of this that are the triangle and the square that are inside of it. And we are linear beings. Okay. Which is why we reference time. We're moving into being quantum beings, but right now, the the thing that happened, if you want to use the reference of Adam and Eve as the first conscious beings, because we're humans before that, right? They were different. And then we stepped into our version of consciousness as this Adam and Eve cycle. We then created a linearity across time to not look at time as coordinates, but look at time as reference frames of how we see the world. Okay. And I can break this down if I need to a little bit more. But those reference frames started to put us on a path of linearity to where this is the original sin is that we use straight lines. Terrence Howard talks about it. We use straight lines in order to create our reality instead of using curvature of space and time. We don't look at all the possibilities. We look at a possibility. And so all of the lines, the beautiful thing about the Philosopher's Stone, and I can draw it out really quickly, which might help the listeners and watchers. Well, if you're listening, you're not going to see it. But if you're watching it, you will. You've got this triangle, right? And then you've got the square, and you've got a circle, and pardon my ugly writing. And you got a circle inside the square, right? So for each line here has a linear aspect of our reality. The cool thing about the triangle is the isness of our reality. The triangle is that, if you take the hermetics, the first three laws of hermetics are the universe is mental, thoughts become things. Everything is correspondent, as above, so below, infinitely deep, infinitely high. It's all like interconnected. The third one is everything is vibration, everything has energy, which there is no polarity or duality to that. It just is. And once you understand that isness, you can create the initial container to where you have to step into balance. So the square is balance, right? So each area of this square supports the triangle. If the square isn't intact and balanced, what happens with the parts of the triangle? This part collapses, that part collapses, this part collapses, it folds in. Well, then if the mini version of God lives inside of me, right? My internal God, my internal force, which is just this holistic spherical wholeness of myself. Well, if that's there, then everything collapses onto it. So then what happens with your reality? Your reality looks really disjointed because you don't even know the God within you. But we all seek the God outside of us, and we've created a version of that that can't even be supported by the apparatus of ourselves. So when you think about that, you're like, oh, well, I actually have all these instructions, and they were embedded in the first book of the Bible. They were embedded in literally every single version of modern religion. And, you even look at, Buddhism. I mean, it's everywhere. This number seven is all over the place. And that's the keys that help us unlock moving us into this ninth dimensional framework. And in literally each and every dimension, and we have 9 dimensions that we live across, there are 7 things we have to do in order to have us hold that reference frame so that we can see the little mini God inside of us at each position of what that looks like. And then at which point we become the whole thing. That was a lot.
I just want to go back. I think that you broke it down really beautifully. The 9 dimensions and the 7 things that we need to do. When you refer to that, is that almost like referring to the levels of consciousness, so that in each level of consciousness, as you continue to grow, you can start to see different maps of the world? Would that be the same type of communication, just for anybody maybe that not aware or understanding? Is that how you could reframe that as well, or no?
Kinda. So it's the way this works. Once you get into it really deeply, it's like depth within depth within depth within depth. And for people that just want to live their life and not have to like sit with this all the time in a frozen or a frozen state, they're like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is too much. I don't never want to complicate somebody with it. So where I generally take people, the simplest version of it is you got 9 dimensions of our creation that go from the first 3 dimensions are space. The fourth dimension is time. The fifth dimension is spirit. The sixth dimension is the plan of God. The seventh dimension is the laws all combined that throttle us from the I state to the we state. Eighth dimension is being able to see things from the perspective of myself and others. And the ninth dimension is everything all coming together. You got these 9 dimensions, right, that are out there. It's hard for people to get to 7 and 8 because they haven't dealt with their own shit, right? So like you get to seven, and I mean 7, 8, 9 is like really hard to get to because you're still dealing with space. Like, well, I don't have enough money. I feel sick, right? My relationships are off. Like all the things that are paths of initiation that keep us away from ourselves. The thing is that we've been looking at this all upside down. We keep looking at the outside world because that's what we've been taught. We rarely go within. So what I teach people is that when you start with anything, because we're called by fifth dimensional beings, we start at the fifth dimension. You start with your soul and your spirit. And then you understand your soul and your spirit. I'm going to use an example of this. I want to start my soul and my spirit, and I want to understand the 7 hermetic principles around my soul and my spirit. So that's how we break it down. So what are the universe is mental, and how am I seeing my spirit? How do those thoughts become things as it relates to my spirit? What is the interconnectedness of my spirit to all of the divine? Right. And if we wanted to go to all of the hell below, like it's all the same thing. So then I create no separation off of my spirit because my spirit just is. It's not good or bad. Right. Then what else is in my spirit? My spirit has energy. So it means it's everywhere. That means if my spirit is energy, that means my spirit is literally everything that's around me. So once I have that framework of the triangle, then I have to think about, well, there's a rhythm of my spirit. Well, I oftentimes feel like my spirit is on or off, and what does that look like, and how can I tap into it? And there's practices for that, right? That people can do. Like a lot in dream state where you connect with your spirit. So people can learn about that, or we use meditation for it, or whatever it might be. And then you say, okay, well, then another purpose of it is that my spirit has polarity. It has good and evil. There's a God and there's a devil. And I really struggle with the concept of the devil, and I really struggle with the concept of God, because why would the God be jealous in certain versions of the Bible? And there's this whole thing in Gnosticism where they break all that down in a whole really beautiful story. But I have to learn how to bring that together, which is what Christ consciousness stands for, is creating balance within the good and the evil of my spirit, right? And then I've got, my cause and effect. What's the cause of my spirit? And once I understand what that looks like, then I can step into the cause of it, which just goes back to thoughts become things, and the energy. You go back to the Trinity, which is like, okay, I'm projecting everything out of my life, okay, into my life. And then my spirit has a gender. My spirit has feminine aspects of it and masculine aspects of it. So what is the masculine aspects of my spirit? It's not the masculine aspects of Sean, right? It's my spirit, right? And so my spirit has a whole gender to it that creates creation off of how the zero and the one come together, and honoring both sides of that. So we never become misogynistic. We are consistently looking to create safety in our spirit. And once you do that, then it's like, then you move into time. Then your space just shows up differently, and you understand like why things are the way they are. And the space you create is just a symbol and a sign that gives you instruction to go back to your spirit. And then you start receiving God's plan because you've integrated everything across the first five dimensions. And then your purpose in life just starts to drop in, and you get information that you've never gotten before.
Bro, I love how simple you explain it. It's really a gift of yours, and it's magical to observe and pay attention to the simplicity in which you deliver it.
Thank
Uh,
you, man.
yeah, dude, bro, it's beautiful and it's so coherent. You can feel it in your physiology and the way that you're expressing it. Um, when you're bringing this level of, I can sense the feminine relationship that you've honed in on, because like you, this mirror of the feminine experience that I needed to navigate personally took me to the jungle for a long time, and helped me
Yeah.
refine this space of presence where I needed to start to listen. And so I love seeing this in you, man, and it's amazing, that you've been able to also feel that and connect with that on the external as well, because now, I mean, that harmony has come into balance. So tell me how you were able to navigate and build that relationship with the feminine inner, because I think that there is also a lot of men, at least from my experience, that if they're able to pay attention to that level, and maybe it's not even men, it could also be women, of course, because we all have that feminine virtue uh, and masculine virtue, but like that, finding that harmony within, as men or women, we're able to then take a lot more responsibility of the spaces that we actually step into. So, and it sounds like you have really honed in on that in your language, in your physiology, in your focus. It doesn't just sound like it. I could see it and observe it, but not but and that is what my my hallucination is that you've been able to capture that infinite space and now be able to observe everything as your teacher now because of that. And you've also done a lot of like those um pattern recognitions to bring those together to be able to now unify them and create new ones. So, and you did that with your relationship, and I imagine that level of relationship now also has expanded to the way that you're in service. So again, going back to, I know that was a lot, but
No, it's great.
going back to this feminine side of things, of like tapping into that knowing and that feeling of guidance, so that you could really allow yourself to use and just go. And then from that place, kind of seeing how the universe was able to guide you as you went. Again, the reason that I bring this up is because I believe that this is important for us, our brothers. And
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I had a funny growing up with the feminine relationship. My mother was adopted. I was her first like male bloodline that she ever had. So her attachment to me, and even some of the things she passed on to me, I wasn't aware of. Like, our parents parent us so weird. And then we as
Mm.
individuals get taught of how we're supposed to receive that. And if I want my mother's love, then I need to do very specific things, right? So starting early, it was, it'd be great to have a lesson for children about like how to see your parents' patterns so that you don't actually absorb them, but you can actually coach them. But that's a whole other thing. But what I ended
That would be like so good.
yeah, 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 that's gonna be a thing one day. But my what I carried a lot of that, and I saw my father, who was a womanizer. His father was a womanizer. Um, sex was a great thing once you got into it because it was like, oh, this feels good. I feel affirmed. And then you just start to manipulate that. And so, in my 20s, once after I got out of being incarcerated, the whole thing, I just found so many ways to manipulate that. And, being a person that I could quickly make money, right? I could quickly use that in order to influence individuals. And I used patriarchal misogyny in order to manipulate the feminine counterpart. What I always found is no matter how much money I made, I never had it. I never kept it. It always slipped through my hands. I wasn't able to hold because I was never giving integrity. I was forcing and pushing my agenda while taking something from somebody. So if I use my hands as an understanding of giving and receiving, because you give with permission, right? You receive with compassion. So I was forcing and, and pushing my agenda out of fear because I wanted these women to see me. And it's like, oh, well, let me find one that is broken enough. And you didn't realize they were broken. You're like, oh, well, this is just that person's pretty and I like her. And we have great, sexual intercourse and conversations. And now we're looking for each other's trauma in each other, not recognizing that I'm carrying this and projecting that onto her. Right. And she just happened to be the version that was receiving enough and the illusion that would resonate with my frequency. So the where it really broke open for me, because even when I got into Joe's work, I was still a bit of a mess, but I was healing myself, right? And made great money. Money would fade away. It would do really weird stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, this doesn't seem something about this doesn't seem right. And I would get into arguments all the time with Sophia's her name, with her all the time. And we would just be butting heads. And eventually she just got sick of it and broke up with me. So, and that was in the time when I started like chasing after all of this like plant medicine and like on this 9 month crazy journey. And one day I woke up after two things cracked me open. And then I'll talk a little bit about what, you asked because I want to give some reference to it. The first thing that cracked me open was iboga. It paralyzed me to the ground and I had to literally walk through all of my feminine trauma, literally all of it. And when I woke up from that, I was on the ground for 36 hours. I woke up, I purged out this black shit. I don't know where it came from and was just sick. And she was in my visions over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Right. And it was just like that. I need to help create safety there. But I got out of it. The thing was, is like, okay, there was a message of how to create safety. I didn't get what it meant. And I went back to her and I was like, hey, Sophia, I really want to be back with you. Let's work this out. Da, da, da. And she's like, hell no, you don't love yourself. But she kept telling me. And I'm like, of course I love myself. And I didn't fully love myself. There's a version that loves part of us and why we're alive. And then eventually we kept working through it, working through it, working through it. And I went to the Hoffman process, and that's where it really cracked open for me. So the Hoffman process is where you go and you really investigate all your negative self-love patterns. It's like 500 on a list. I had 296, and you map them to your parents, and you realize that it's not really you, it's what you've been taught, right?
Mm.
And so I can see what my mother taught me. I could see what my father taught me. I mean, there was stuff in there like porn on the coffee table. I'm like, this is in here? Like I didn't realize that was a normal thing, but I had porn on the coffee table growing up, right? There was a lot of this weird stuff that was in there that I would have never imagined would have been there that was so personal. But you see the patterns that just keep expanding, keep expanding. And once I went to Hoffman and you do a lot of work around, somatic release of it, you do work where it's like your emotional child release of it, you intellectually walk through it, and you are able to see every version that could keep you trapped. And not everybody has to go through this, but if you go through it, it's wildly transformative because it puts you in a space where you make a deal with yourself to release that trauma. And once you've released it, anytime you try to do something that is out of integrity or old behavioral patterns that was tied to that trauma, it's like the code of the matrix just breaks and everything falls apart, like everything. So the way you have to walk in integrity after you leave that space, after you recognize the patterns within yourself, you choose to release them fully and you let them go. It is, I've seen so many people go through Hoffman and they work to be the same version of their old self and their lives fall apart. Like, we had a Slack channel, not a Slack channel, a WhatsApp channel. And people are like, this is the worst year of my life because I keep trying to be my old self. And there's a new us. I wouldn't call it the new us. It's the us that has always been, that has been forgotten. And we forgot about it the day we were born, right? And then we go into the program that everybody else wants us to be, and we haven't found ourselves. And that's that, that little circle right here, right? I can't really see it, but that little circle inside of the structure of all the things we have to understand about ourselves between the isness and the balance of creation, that when we know that little circle, everything else starts to shift. And that little circle, there's no accident. That's the receivership and the balance of masculine and feminine embodiment within. So in the early days, I always consider it's like walking. When you're a child and you first start walking, you trip like crazy. And then you stumble into things. And then you start walking and then you start running. And then you're like, okay, I can do this without thinking about it. And at first, for any guys on this who are listening to this or watching, it's going to feel like you're fucking falling every time you start moving, when you start to becoming a more embodied masculine and even your embodied feminine version of yourself. And that embodied feminine, the traits around that are, I'll just talk about them really quickly.
Please.
It is being intuitive, right? Being able to, I call it, where you understand the future, because there really is no time. So it's weird, but you have an understanding of things. You are intuitive. You listen to the divine, what comes in here. Okay. You receive that. Okay. You stand in strength. So like everything in the Kabbalah, they have it broken down into masculine, feminine, and balance in the middle. The left side is the feminine, and it goes from understanding, it then goes to strength, and then it goes to foundation. And so the feminine versions of yourself are you foundational enough? That creates this safety thing, right? Are you strong? Okay. And strength isn't pushing and being this. Strength is literally, do you have strength in your spirit? And do you understand and are you intuitive enough to receive? Okay. On the masculine side, embodied masculine is, can you be wise and can you integrate? So wisdom is being able to take all the lessons that we've been taught, look at them and gain wisdom. The wisdom is not being traumatic and being like, oh, watch out for that divot. It's saying, well, there's a hole in the ground. Let's go pave it over. That's wisdom because I'm now integrating it. I'm not avoiding it. Okay. It's being able to move into love. That's also on that side, okay, of the tree of life, or, the Kabbalah framework. And then can you stand in victory? Can you scream from the rooftops and use your voice in order to have people understand that you are victorious in your life at all times? In gratitude. That's how we move in embodied masculine and feminine. So then in every stage of your life, it's like, okay, am I being victorious? And am I using a reference frame of what the world has told me is victorious, or the one that's inside of me? Right? That stuff, like when you get that in order, then you're in balance, and then you recognize it in yourself and you see it in others, and you see where others are off. And oftentimes people say, well, when things are off, it's a reflection of me, so I need to get away from them. No, it's an initiation step for you to be able to hold that person, for you to be able to see them and say, and even if it's not physically doing anything on a daily basis, you energetically send them something, you send them your heart, because we are all vibration. They'll feel that, they'll know that. And then they shift something in them, that splinter in their mind. You just being in their presence will allow you to create that frequency, and then they will start to show up differently. And they'll just start showing up in your world more. It's like crazy. Like you'll see somebody at the store or a gym or something like that, and you'll do your thing, and you see them a couple of times. Like, why I can go to the gym at 6 in the morning, 10 at night, 3 in the afternoon, whenever, and they're always there at the same time as me. There's no accident, right? You go to the store, no matter when you go to the store, you see the same people shopping. It's like, okay, this is weird. And I go at different times and I'm not predictable in my shopping, right? They will eventually start to swirl themselves into your life to where they just happen to be there with you. Then all of a sudden they move down the street. This happened to me the other day. As I moved, I see you at the store all the time. I see this. Then we start talking. There's something there, right? And it's the more we heal ourselves, the more these magical miracle workers and angels show up in our lives. And then we have a responsibility to hold them, right? Whether it's holding them energetically or holding them physically, whatever it might be. And that is really where the work comes in, where we collectively go through this ascension process.
Bro, I love that you bring up the part of focusing on that harmony or the balance within ourselves and really anchoring that into the temple within, or I always it's like it's funny is like, I always was curious when I was a little boy. I was like, why do they keep talking about everything on the outside? I swear something here is inside. Like it's so interesting because you ask yourself these questions when you're a little boy and you're just like, this makes no sense. Like if our creator, if God made us, then it's got to be around us, like got to be inside. And like, and I remember going into like these places or feeling in nature, and like feeling in myself such deep peace. And I was like,
Yeah.
that feels good. That feels right. That feels harmonious.
Yep.
And it was interesting because then when you recognize that space of presence with somebody else, you're like, okay, well, how can I find a solution with the disharmony and choose to see the positive? And it's almost like they would get more angry at me. They would get more
Hmm.
angry. Like, and I needed to learn how to navigate the compassion, as you mentioned, to really discover, like what is it that in me I need to be more aware of. And this came
Yeah.
down like, what can I do better? What can I do better? So I love that you bring up the component of responsibility because the question I imagine for you during these adversities was like, hey, how can I continue to take responsibility of the world I'm creating around me?
Yeah.
And what was that like, and why do you feel? Because like what I noticed, especially when it comes like after Joe Dispenza, is and many others. It's not just Joe. It's like after Tony Robbins or after these other like amazing experiences. What's lacking in is like I didn't know how to integrate or create infrastructure properly, and so I believe that this is kind of our responsibility is to integrate the infrastructure so people don't have to just go to these events or to these
Yeah.
experiences, but to actually create an opportunity where our kids and our future generations can live at the standard of outstanding excellence and they don't have to go back to their own repeated patterns because our generation has taken responsibility of the current experience of life and saying, hey, we're not gonna just like walk over the pothole. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna take responsibility for the playground, and we're gonna choose to allow our children and our grandchildren to live in a space where they get to play on the playground. They get to realize that this whole amazing home is our playground, and we get to do it as a team. We're not here to like compete with one another like our predecessor. We're like,
Yeah.
no, bro, let's go figure this out. Let's go have fun. Let's be weird. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
this is what I imagine. Like we're standing on the shoulders of Joe and Tony and all these other greats
Yeah.
to really create and make our futures even more fun. And it doesn't mean that it's like joyful or not taking responsibility. It means joy. It means fun in the experience that we actually get to create. We choose to
Yes.
create. We choose to manifest, and we're doing it as a team. So, what does that look like for you in terms of this responsibility, or I know you're already integrating lots. You're doing tons. Uh, and do you see anything shift that even more of us can kind of come together to do this as a team?
Yes.
What are your observations?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. So I always go backward to go forward.
That's
But
good. That's
I'll
good. And
take,
I love that you're
yeah,
tracking. So I really appreciate it
yeah.
because so I really appreciate it. So
Yeah. So the interesting thing about like the Joe and Tony and Sadhguru work, their ascension process, so their growth process happened very much so, and it's accelerated, but very much so like in this age of Pisces, right? And they had to create enough noise through a lot of hard work. I mean, how long it took Joe to get to where he was wasn't like this, right? It was a long, long time and very small events. And, Tony, same thing. Tony, I mean, lived out of his car and had to hustle and bust his ass. And it took him, decades to get to where he is. We're accelerating much faster now. And they have a rhythm of getting people to come into a funnel. And what I always call it, it's like when you go to a Joe event or a Tony event, you can set up a practice, but that practice requires you to continue to hook into that apparatus. And the amount of self-agency that you have is only as limited as you allow yourself to detach, okay, from it and create your own thing. Every one of us is heroes in the story, right? And what my job is to be a guide, not the hero. And when a lot of people look at Tony and Joe and all, they're the heroes to them. They're like, "Oh, you're my hero, so I'm going to keep it." Joe is my hero, still is in a lot of ways. Love him,
same
but
for me.
also, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, it's now how can I be a guide and attract other guides that understand that it's not about the ego. Like we'll always have. It's not about making 10, 50, $100 million, billions of dollars. It doesn't matter. It's just energy. It'll always come to you when you know how to receive. Right. So that is the letting go of that and then being able to say, okay, I know my purpose. I'm going to stand in that purpose and I'm going to be infinitely abundant, infinitely wealthy off of the knowing within myself. And so having a team of what I call the Avengers that are coming in now, exactly, to stand in that truth and understand that, like, hey, there are very specific teachings, frameworks that when we work off of these systems, like life just happens. Like it just becomes abundant and you remove it. It's like, and once again, I'm gonna use a system of walking again. When you get up and you start walking, you have two legs. You're not going to get up and just start like walking off your butt cheeks, right? You can't just do that, right? You can't just get up and start like walking on your hands. You can, it's harder, right? But it's going to be challenging. Like once you know, like, hey, my foot plants like this, my toes do this, my knees do that. When you're a baby, you're figuring that out naturally. It's the same thing as a structure that we've got, right? And so when you know that, like, hey, we've been left code 7 days of the week, seven chakras of the body, seven continents, seven colors, seven, you name it, seven, 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 seven. It's everywhere, right? It's like, what does that seven mean? And then there's some entity, we can call it Thoth, Hermes, Trismegistus, whoever, said, okay, let's map these out into something that makes sense. And then you find them literally in every ancient religious every religious text out there. Well, let's do something with that and let's establish that structure. And then we all just teach the same thing, but it's not teaching with the control mechanism of religion to keep people away from the truth. It's helping people find it and then say, oh, wow, look at this amazing, beautiful stuff inside of me. I now know something nobody knows. They always say there are no new ideas, right? There's plenty of new ideas. And those ideas are the ideas of consciousness, not the ideas of matter. Okay. And those ideas are the ones that we haven't brought in, which is why people like, doubted on Terrence Howard. Well, he had all these like epiphanies and he went out there and he like started throwing things out. Now, does one times one equal one or two? Who cares? But the fact that people are having a conversation about stuff that is, Walter Russell's Universal One book that was just like people forgot about, or now digging into Tesla and you have masses, millions of people just wondering how this thing works. And there's at least that question. That was the point, right? That there's a new idea, there's a new thought, there's a new space to be, and we can move into this quantum space where everything is a potential. And from that, we integrate, right? Which is the most important thing. We take the integrated path, which is wisdom and no longer staying in the trauma of the past. And now the systems that we set up are a group of guides that go out and do that work. We understand the apparatus that it's built off of. It's whether you come in from Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, wherever. I don't really care where you come from. Do you believe in 7 days of the week? Well, yeah, well, let's start there. If you're a, If you're an atheist, like I don't care where you start from. Do you know that there's seven continents in the world? Do you realize you have seven systems of the body? There's seven colors of the rainbow. Well, if you see that, can you map that together, right? I can, we can take anybody from anywhere of any walk of life and help them see that truth. And then that just maps into, well, if your system is off, let's start looking at the correspondence of, oh, well, I haven't been loving myself. I'll give you an example. I posted about it today. I was sexually abused 9 to 14. Didn't use my voice, didn't talk about it. I had a thyroid condition when I got older. Literally at 33 years old, developed a thyroid condition because I didn't use my voice. I stored that trauma in my throat, right? There's no accident. I can map everything that's ever happened to a point of trauma in my life that I haven't let go of or I haven't detached from or accepted. And so we can do that with anybody. My grandmother, she had colon cancer, breast cancer, and Alzheimer's. She didn't feel safe in a relationship. She lost her daughter, which was in her heart, had her daughter at an early age, and she was never in her intuition. She was never in her embodiment of herself. So what? It tapped here, and it tapped a root. So this is all teachable. Like everything that I've learned is a teachable process. It's a teachable process how to be psychic. It's a teachable process how to move in telepathy. It's a teachable process how to understand, um, how to put the story together and see what the potential of it's coming and see the big picture. It's very teachable. And then you just apply it in an integrated fashion. And then you have to stand in integrity. If you don't, then your universal self is going to kick your own ass. And then one day you'll be enlightened. You'll be enlightened on your deathbed, but it might as well do it and have fun while we're in this human form.
That is the gift, is doing it while we're in the human form. And
Yeah,
I'm curious because you actually took a lot of responsibility from uh it was your grandmother, right? That had the
yeah,
trauma, right? So
yeah,
you were able to, I mean, it would have been passed down to you in some way, shape, or form. And so as a result, you actually chose to open up your voice, discover the root, discover the heart, really open up and curate the life that you decided to live on. So I imagine that gave you, I mean, the 9 months probably did a lot of work in going to that layer of depth uh, to now be able to so beautifully express yourself, in all
yeah,
of these seven areas of your internal self. So that is something that I think that most people are unaware of really going of paying attention to like what is going on in their grandmas or in their parents or how those triggers get to teach us. And it's beautiful that the fact that you were even aware of it now, right? And or back then and now you've taken the responsibility of choosing that, hey, I don't need to live out the same pattern. I don't need to continue on with that story. I can stop it on an energetic level
yeah,
and then choose to exchange my energy into the world or reflect it out there with fully my true self. And I think that this is the biggest thing is so many times society has projects so many things at us. It's not just family or traumas intergenerationally. Fundamentally, it becomes our ancient traumas that have
yeah,
affected us so much to the past, where instead of choosing to like collectively work together, there's some sort of ego or competition that they this not they we choose
yeah,
to uh, play out this scarce mentality versus the abundance that's always been available to us. So I know you really work tremendously about, focusing on expressing your voice and work with allowing people to tap into that true abundance because you've been able to anchor that in through the seven energetics within and around you. So now how can somebody choose to really tap into that level of infinite intelligence and those areas of abundance within themselves to really open up all those energetic systems to start seeing the ability around them and attract it to them instead of thinking that they need to go out there and force it.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. I'm gonna kind kind of go off this question and come back to it because it's a thing to pay attention to when if you're listening to this one, you're on your path. Everybody's on their path, even if you're not. But as you go through it, there's a different state of awareness about seeing what I call the illusion. Everything outside of is an illusion. You're an illusion, I'm an illusion to you, right? It's just we're an illusion. We are a wave that has constructed itself into matter at what Donald Hoffman, if you don't know him, watch his TED Talk. It's 21 minutes. It's magical. That our fitness requires. There's a thing called fitness, which is you are getting exactly what your soul needs at the time you are witnessing it. Okay. So your fitness requires for us to be able to exist and survive, right? Like fitness would be like what you eat or person that you're talking to. And all of that is code. Everything is coded, right? Outside of us. And so there's what they call, he talks about it, there's the computer, there's the person watching the computer, there's the computer, and you got your desktop, you got folders on your desktop and applications. You have no idea how that works on the other side of the computer. The programs that it's running off of, the cloud infrastructure it's snapping into. You can be like, oh, here's the SQL code, and I totally get the way that it's written, right? And there's people out there that understand the SQL code, they don't even understand how to do UI or UX or what it looks like on the other side of the computer, right? So everybody has different experiences of how they engage with this matrix of life. And all of the repeat patterns that happen in your days are code for you to remember something. So to the point of like the trauma that I'm able to like pick up on, we could take, let's say, all my friends have a very specific allergy all of a sudden. And that allergy is, I don't know what the allergy would be. Let's say it's hives to penicillin. I'm just going to throw something random out there. All of them have the same damn allergy. That would be weird and a very specific sign and signal to me about what does that mean. Now, what a lot of us do is we go on Google and we say, okay, Google, what is the spiritual meaning of everybody who's having a penicillin thing? Well, that's not your answer. That's Google's answer. And it's close enough because you're projecting it out. But why do you have that? When did you gather it? And what does that specifically mean to you? When you take penicillin, it's pink, right? If you have hives on your body, that means something on your skin is off. And if also in the fact that, let's say, for instance, it only happens when things are incoherent in your life, well, I need to start finding harmony in my life that's related to how I show up in the outside version of the world. That's tied to, feminine energy or like, let's say pink or intuition, which is a little bit higher than the purple, right? And so I'm not tapping into the divine, which is causing for there to be disharmony in my life. And therefore, what's happening outside of me is this allergy that I have that every time I take it, I end up getting hives on my skin. And my skin is how the world sees me. So you can piece that story together, right? This is a teachable thing. Like I learned this through, it's not like it's like, it's a very teachable thing of people being able to see like, there's a color, there's a word, there's some numbers, there's some things. Let's map that story into something. And what that does is it allows you to understand why you're creating it for yourself, to love yourself. And love is just finding the harmony. So why did I create this penicillin allergy for me to love myself? Why did I create me being a Black person in America with slave-bound trauma for me to love myself? Why did I create sexual abuse from 9 to 14 for me to love myself? Why did I create me slitting my wrist at 20-something years old in order for me to love myself? Why did I create incarceration for me to love myself? Ask that question, right? And that's a hard question because people are like, well, that's sick, Sean. Why would I create something like that to love myself? And if you recognize that the whole thing is an energetic manifestation of the love of you, and you understand that God or divine has no judgment, then everything was created out of love. You just got to know the reason. And what keeps us from the reason is a process of a lack of detachment or a lack of acceptance. You haven't accepted what it is, right? So all of those different apparatuses as they come together and you say, I want to have that level of awareness, you don't snap into it overnight. You do a little bit of the work. Like an exercise I go through is this rule of 32, where in the Kabbalah, there's 32 paths of wisdom. Okay. I said, well, there's got to be 32 paths of understanding if everything lives in balance. Okay. And if I go through the process of writing down the 32 reasons why, then I have an understanding of it. And every time I do the 32 on anything that I'm troubled with, it always ends up almost at the exact same answer, which is interesting. But you see your progression along the way. And then you have compassion for each version of that progression. And if you've ever done like a plant medicine ceremony or an ayahuasca, or just like really zoomed out into like a deep meditation, you'll start seeing like fractals, right? And those fractals are all the different perspectives of what we call superposition in the quantum. Superposition is the possibility either way, positive or negative, or within the polarity. You start to see it all, and then you just choose the one that sits in your heart. And so practices I take people through is like, hey, write down 32 reasons why. It's, again, some people it takes them weeks to write down 32 reasons. Some people it takes minutes. But it just depends on how much you've put in your way that you have to overcome to be like, okay, well, I'm going to end up at something here. And on the 33rd one, I mean, you get to 32, 33 is always your number, which is the same thing as the, you know, spine, the vertebrae, Christ ascension number. Like there's all over the place with that too. So with that said, the the process is that. And then the other thing I recommend people to do is listen to your body. Your body keeps a hell of a score. And your body is, I just call it this, we don't know how to tap into. This is like a miracle in how it's constructed. What do they say? There's some math around the DNA sequencing. And for us to have effective, here, I've got it written down. I'm gonna pull it up. It's like the craziest numbers. Hold on real quick. I gotta pull this up because it's like, so this guy, Dr. Stephen Meyer, um, said, it's impossible for us to be an accident. And literally, if we wanted to randomly create a gene that produces a new protein with a sequence of 155 units, which is really short, okay, the probability that we would have one that's actually functioning, like functional versus dysfunctional, when we put the genetic code together, is 10. One is about 1 in 10 to the 77th power. Now, to visualize this, imagine searching for one atom in a space as vast as 1 trillion Milky Way galaxies. We'd have to find one atom in a space that's as vast as 1 trillion Milky Way galaxies in order to actually like randomly get our DNA to work the way that it does. And we have billions. I mean, what is it? We have 120,000, sorry, genetic sequences. And this is just doing it with 155. So if you take that perspective and you say, okay, what the hell am I? And all we're doing is, walking, eating, sleeping, fucking, whatever you want to call it. We're not even doing what the body's supposed to do. So when we listen to
Exactly.
this thing, dude, this is like, we have so much superpower ability that we have not even come close to tapping into. Damn the how much we use the brain. Like the body, we don't use it properly.
Amen. Amen, bro. And this is, I just want to really reflect back to that component of abundance and
Yeah,
tapping what you said to the consciousness of it all. And so
yeah,
that pure source intelligence, that pure source consciousness, and paying attention to the frequency of the colors
yes.
and communication through the colors. Like, bro, I love that, like that you're bringing that to the table right now, like that you're, the set and the seven and the colors. Can you go a little bit deeper, at least just to curate a little bit of awareness around why the colors are so important and why the numbers
Yeah.
uh correlate with each other? Is it okay if you can go a little bit deeper in that, bro?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. So all of it's a map. All of it's a map to the code, right? So I look at everything as like computer code, but it's all a map to the code. You have 9 numbers plus a zero. Okay. And those 9 numbers have very specific sequencing into them. The first seven, okay, which are the 7 colors, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the colors, are literally like our map of our daily lives that allows us to go from I to we. It goes from I state to we state. When we go to we state, we look at things from the perspective of the all, right? So they are a guidebook for us to be able to do that. And when we start seeing, you know, let's say for instance, I'm seeing red all the time. Like I went over to Serbia 2 years ago and I was there and there are women wearing, like there were so many women over there with red dyed hair. They're wearing red on their clothes. They're wearing red everywhere. And I'm like, this is crazy, right? Because they don't feel safe. And if you go and talk to any of them who worked at one of the companies that I was consulting for, they don't feel safe. You drop in immediately and know that that's a thing. So you can call it out. And they've got red on their head, and it's okay to be a redhead, but like you're intentionally, I mean, it was like a lot. Like I'm like, okay, well, two things. One, they don't feel safe. But then number two, also I'm witnessing that because somebody else might go there and have a totally different experience. Well, then what is my job? What is my responsibility when I witness that color in so many women? Okay. My responsibility is not only to recognize that it's there, but two, to do something about it. If it's just sending energy that way and saying, okay, when I'm present with you, I'm going to help you feel safe. Number two, if it's beyond just the presence, then I'm starting to put things like I'm working with a company at the time. I'm starting to put structure into place around that company that also helps them feel safe. So now I'm actually doing the integrated work. So that's the color red showing up, right? Color green showing up sits in the heart chakra. What does that mean? If you're seeing it show up in really incoherent places, well, there must be something off here. If I'm seeing it show up in really coherent places, well, something's right here, or something is in harmony. Okay. So if it's in harmony, great. If it's out of harmony, well, then I'm witnessing like, oh, all of my friends are running around me, losing their minds, and they all got green shirts on. Well, that's a signal. That's code. That's telling me something, right? If my wife is all of a sudden like losing her mind and wearing purple all the time, and she's got migraines and she's got the purple shirt on and she's all this whatnot, I'm like, okay, twofold. One, she's not in her intuition, right? I'm not creating safety for that to happen. Two, there's something off that I'm not in my intuition, I'm not listening about, and I need to start dropping it. I need to actually sit a little bit more still and start to receive whatever the divine is telling me, because it's one, knocking at my feminine counterpart to get my side, to get me to pay attention. I might start getting headaches all of a sudden. And purple is around me like crazy, and I'm seeing it, and it's not in vibe, it's not in coherence. So that's just a guidebook of being able to be like, oh, well, this is the color, this is what it looks like. Then you can map it to days of the week, which is even crazier. You could say, okay, well, Sunday means this, Tuesday means this. And I've got a map that I've built out where it kind of goes through each day of the week, what colors associated with it, what frequencies associated with that color. So then you listen to sounds, right? You then go into and say, okay, well, if that's that part of the chakra of the body, what do I need to say each part of my day when I wake up, just to set an intention so that I'm doing that work and paying attention to it. And then I'm creating the harmony using the days of the week as a map in order to pierce the veil or crack the code that allows me to stand in my personal truth and create differently from within in harmony versus chaos. That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because I know for me, it's the same thing as like I can really pay attention to the colors of what people are wearing, and then recognize around me in a certain situation from an observer perspective what the universe or the creator is communicating to me through the
Yeah.
experience of all the colors and the energies and the way that everything is happening. So it's almost like you're completely mapped out, or you're like doing this major observation perspective in the present moment, and all this energy is moving around you, and you're just like, whoa, overload on energy sometimes. And it's just like I have to like really do the work inside to be present, to be listening enough, because there's so much information happening. And by the way, this happens to all of us, right? It's
Yeah.
it's happening to all of us at a subconscious awareness. But what I've learned personally from my experience is learning to listen and pay attention even more to that now, because of all the adversities, challenges, overcomings,
Mhm.
experiences that have given the ability to recognize those patterns. And so it's beautiful that that you've been able to uh, curate that space of mapping it out within your own experience. And I believe all of us, this is like the real language, right? The real language that's happening, versus,
Right.
because we know that this is just the 7%. Everything else, 93%, 55 comes from our body, 38 from our facial expressions. So, I know that for me, I've learned always by observing and by like paying attention. And I know that the more we tap into that level of innocence and curiosity, the more we can actually start to uh, discover parts of ourselves in each other that we truly, truly love. So How
Yeah.
has that curiosity helped you to navigate these depths of how you choose to now move forward? You know, because we're always learning. You know, you're
Yeah.
from what I observing, you know, we're always willing to know that we don't know. And this stage of curiosity that you're at now, what are you kind of moving into even more now as you start to develop and curate and master where you're at and learn new things as you go?
Man, it's I would say that, what the way I look at curiosity is, I look at it as imagination and inspiration, right? What can I when I sit with myself, or and even it's gone beyond that versus less sitting with myself. Because a lot of times you sit with yourself and you get information. Now it's just like in the flow of my day, am I paying attention to the signs I'm giving myself, right? And those signs are there's so much meaning and fullness in literally just walking down the street. And we take just our creation for granted. Like we're like, oh, like I'm not paying attention to the three cars with the license plate numbers that are sitting there that are a miracle, or the fact that like look at these plants that I've never paid attention to. Like I realized the other day I got blue flowers in my backyard, and I didn't even know this. Like I was like, oh, fucking A. So, I'm driving, what does that mean? Right. And then one, it's not assigning a limitation to the meaning, it's the possibility to the meaning. So that's the imagination. The imagination is there's so many possibilities that I could see around the meaning of life. And there's not one, right? From the perspective of myself. And when I see all of that, then it becomes one, which is a bit of a mind fuck for people because like, well, there's not one, then how does it become one? It becomes one through the collective, right? Because it's not like you don't choose one from the limitation of yourself. You choose it from the collective of the all. So you know where it's leading me is just to be in surrender and receive to just what is around me and pay attention to the fact that my eyes are projecting out such a beautiful life every single day and have extreme gratitude for all of it that is being projected out. And part of it's my creation, yes, and part of it's the creation of all those around me. So when we go out and we go, me and my wife go drive down the street and we see everything, whether it's a homeless person, whether it's, last night I was walking out of a comedy club and saw a car crash, boom, right in front of me. And everybody was safe, everybody was okay. And it's like, well, what ended up crashing? We walked out of the thing, we were like, oh, this comedy show is too long. And all of a sudden something crashes in front of you. Car was green. Get into your heart and appreciate the fact that you even witnessed it. People got up on stage and tried, right? And so it's like, it's like almost like you're checking yourself and leveraging the illusion to remember how to stay in love all the time. And when those little traumatic things glitch on your radar, you're like, okay, I've got to check myself so that I can create a different viewpoint. And then also the other people are doing it too. So then you have to be consistent enough to make sure that you're magnifying yourself in such a, not a big way, but a rhythmic way that vibration is everywhere all the time and people want to be close to it. And so then they walk in that same vein, right? They do the same thing. And therefore that crash never happens. But, it's a different way of looking at the world. A thing that I've done recently is I've said, what if I was the last person on earth? And then I looked through my eyes on all of creation. What would that look like? Right. Then at which point I'm the thing that's created all of time from the last person that ever existed. And that's how we should walk through life because then you have a different appreciation. You actually see the world as God sees you, right? You just see it from a material standpoint. You're like, oh, you're no longer worried about time. There's nobody else. It's just you. You have a responsibility of how you viewed everything you've created. And then at which point it isn't, that I've got to look across time and figure out why I'm here. I have to look at it and say, okay, now with the rest of my life that I have, can I not view all of creation that has ever happened from a perspective of love and change the frequency that I apply to that? So when I take that back into the void, I'm taking a really wholeness and healing perspective of my experience instead of one that's miserable. If you have that responsibility to pass that back to the divine. That's how we all should be living.
Brother, you're a beautiful man. I just really want to acknowledge the magic that you bring to this world and the work that you are really curating and channeling. It's really special to listen to you. And I just love it. You know, I could sit here with you and talk for hours because I feel like we're really in a space of like total ease and flow with
Yeah.
tremendous comfort and grace. So I'm really excited, you know, to get to know each other more as the years and decades go on. And I'd
Yes,
love
sir.
for if anybody wants to know more about you, your wisdom, what you're bringing to the world, how they can connect more in depth with anything. Where's the best way to find you, to work with you, to support you in any way, shape, or form?
Bro, I love it. Yeah, thank you for that. And you're beautiful as well. We're all beautiful reproductions of each other, right? And so thank you for the invite, number one. Thank you for the space. What you're doing is beautiful. So I just want to honor you there. Uh, on my end, you know, Instagram is my main jam right now. I'm looking to branch into YouTube and other things soon and talk about these types of things in a more produced way. But on those channels, like I do on IG, but IG Abundance 10,000, you can find me there. Currently, right now, there's a link in my bio that will take you to a free class I'm offering on 8/18. We just dropped it yesterday, and I think we only have like 400 spots left, or we were going to go for 1,000 in one day, like 550 signed up. So that's been bananas. Like, okay, cool. Didn't anticipate that. I've never done that before. So I just kind of just talk. So so I'm excited about that launching. Would love for anybody to join. I feel like it'll be revolutionary for people. And and that's kind of it. You know, if you need marketing services, I have an agency called myasin.io. Check it out. All the videos that I make on my channel, if you're ever interested in that, we make them in-house. And so we have a team that does that and scales it for conscious creators in order to help with personal branding. And it's not stupid expensive like a lot of people charge for it. So we just, once again, want to make it accessible or are making it accessible for people. So those are ways to find, work with me, work with our teams, all the things. Yeah.
Amazing. And last question, and I'll have the links and everything in the show notes as well. But I wanted to also ask last question I always ask everybody is if you had 3 days left to live, what would you be doing?
3 days left to live. I would kind of like the thing I said before on the last man on earth thing. I would I would I would look at the one. I would write down as much knowledge as I have. I would embrace those that I love. Spend all the time with them that I could, and just play, have fun, experience life, be free. I think it's I wouldn't do much different than I do I do right now, honestly. I don't think I'd do anything any different. I would just be doing what I'm doing now. It's like share, love, be present, and expand and if you could just change one life, you change every life. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
Beautiful, brother. Don't go
Um,
anywhere. I'm just gonna be curious. Big love.